So guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why overpopulation is not concerning whatsoever. I'll be real, the only reason I'm watching this is because I want to see how this can be the case, because yeah, I'm just kind of confused how the earth getting overcrowded or overpopulated isn't a concern. I mean, we'll see. Obviously it's just his opinion, I guess. Maybe there's actually some factual sort of evidence behind it, but I'll take it all with a grain of salt. But still, be interesting to see someone's perspective, and maybe, well, I guess he does know more than me, and maybe it's not actually about what I'm thinking, but gonna get into this reaction. Hopefully you're going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Instagram, my Twitter for those who want to follow me. Same for my Patreon if you want to see extra reactions that get blocked on YouTube. I'm posting a video today, plus I've posted quite a few over the last week or two, so yeah, if you want more videos that I react to that I can't post to YouTube, links are there. But let's just check this out and see what evidence or what he talks about in this video.
It's no surprise that as the world population continues to grow, the limits of essential global resources such as potable water, fertile land, forests and fisheries are becoming more obvious. You don't have to be a genius to work out that, on the whole, more people use more resources and create more waste. So how many humans do you think there will be here on Earth when we reach what is known as peak human population? I can tell you that right now there's about 7.9 billion humans, and that this number has yet to stop rising. So what is your guess? 9 billion? 10 billion? 100 billion? Well, if your guess was anywhere between 9.7 and 10.9 billion, you'd technically be correct, because it turns out estimates for the amount of humans Earth will contain at its peak vary quite a bit depending on who you ask. The United Nations is—
Wait, so they predict it's gonna go down? That's the actual prediction? What, because there won't be enough resources, or because of like other reasons?
And who you ask. The United Nations is confident that 10.9 billion people will eventually roam Earth's surface, and other studies done by the Lancet, for example, indicate that the magic number is closer to 9.7 billion. So just to make everything easier, let's say the human population will peak at 10 billion. Great. Now comes the more difficult question. When will this happen? Again, guesses by the smartest people vary by a lot. 4 decades in fact. So anywhere between 2060 and 2100 is the best guesses we have. So let's just say 2080 is when we'll reach peak human population. Now comes the hardest question of them all. What happens when we reach peak human population? Do we have enough space for all these people? Is there enough food and water? What will the consequences be? Well, that's what I wanted to figure out, and what I found is quite horrifying.
Oh.
And it turns out that—
So is this title clickbait? Because wait, what? I'm so confused.
The biggest problem of all in regards to our population size is something I could have never imagined. But let's start with whether or not we have enough space for everyone. The total land surface area of Earth is about 57.3 million square miles, of which about 33% is desert and about 24% is mountains.
Wow, that's crazy. So when you think about it, 43% of the land is actually like possible to live on. Obviously certain, well, I guess the part of desert, like in like Saudi Arabia and like Qatar, they can build cities on them. Would that be considered desert though? I guess it is, because they are like built on desert, but then they've just got so much money they can like transform the lands, I guess. I don't know, maybe not. But when you think about it, 43% of the land is like land that we can possibly live on, and then even then there's probably some parts of that land that you can't live on. Like, it's crazy when you realize there's just so little land in comparison to what you think there is. Half of it is inhabitable. I can't say that word, but you
which
know
are
what I'm
not
trying to say.
ideal places for human survival, so let's subtract this uninhabitable land from the total, which amounts to 57% or 32.6 million square
He's
miles.
on the maths for me.
Total. This leaves 24.6 million square miles or 15.77 billion acres of habitable land. Divide this figure by the peak human population of 10 billion, and you get 1.5 acres or about 0.6 hectares per person.
Oh.
However, in these calculations,
That's alright, but also probably not alright, because I guess a lot of those people aren't going to be spread out, you know?
we have not allowed for any amenities such as highways, schools, hospitals, agricultural fields, and so on. So maybe 1.5 acres is a bit generous, but even so, there should be enough space for us all, which means space is not the problem. So what about food? Well, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the world already produces more than 1.5 times the amount of food we need. And that means we already have enough food to feed 10 billion people. Okay. Unfortunately, neither the study nor the conventional wisdom addresses the real cause of hunger. Hunger is caused by poverty and inequality. not scarcity. So while we do
Yeah.
have plenty of food for everyone currently, we would be in great trouble if we all started living like an average American, as an average middle-class American consumes 3.3 times the subsistence level of food and almost 250 times the subsistence level of clean water. So if everyone on Earth lived like a middle-class American, the planet would have a carrying capacity of around 2 billion people. But on the topic of water,
Wow.
do we have enough of it? Well, fresh water makes up a very small fraction of all water on the planet. While nearly 70% of the world is covered by water, only 2.5% of it is fresh. The rest is saline and ocean-based. Even then, just 1% of our
Can't you just clean the water though? Is that not possible to like clean the ocean water? I mean, I'm probably being stupid as hell, but is that not a possibility?
fresh water is easily accessible, with much of it trapped in glaciers and snowfields. In essence, only 0.007% of the planet's water is available to fuel and feed the future 10 billion
God
people.
damn.
While the amount of fresh water on the planet has remained fairly constant over time, continually recycled through the atmosphere and back into our cups, the population has increased a lot. This means that every year, competition for a clean, copious supply of water for drinking, cooking, bathing, and sustaining life intensifies. Though, despite this, there still should be enough for everyone. So, what about resources? First and foremost, we must discover new resources, preferably those with high concentration of the critical commodities that we need. Think metals and hydrocarbons. Over the past few decades, extraction of many natural resources has become more difficult. Many current mines have lower concentrations or grades of metals and minerals than in the past. Hydrocarbons are extracted from more complex, lower permeability host rocks, and deeper aquifers must be tapped for water. As a result, we expend more energy, disturb more land, and spend more per unit of production than in the past. The discovery of new high-quality, high-value deposits can reverse this trend, allowing increased efficiency of extraction per unit of commodity. Making such discoveries is challenging, but recent history demonstrates that there is considerable potential for more discoveries, especially at modest depths. In spite of rapid increases in the use of all natural resources, the extractive industries have kept up with demand. It seems that as long as there's an economic incentive to keep finding new deposits, we will keep finding them. Which means, so far, we've ruled out land, water, food, and resources as potential causes for concern. And that leaves pretty much nothing to be worried about when it comes to peak human population. But despite this, it seems that the scientific consensus of how many people
So it's all looking like at this point we could deal with it. But I'm still thinking about how at the start he said something that I was like, okay, this sounds quite bad. So I'm guessing it's going to switch at a certain point. He's sort of talking about how it would be possible to deal with it like at such a high population. But then there was just sort of like a caveat, so I'm just waiting for that.
people Earth can sustain, also known as the carrying capacity, vary immensely. Debate about the actual human carrying capacity of Earth dates back hundreds of years, and today the range of estimates is enormous. I mean, take a look at this. These are 65 independent studies on this matter, and here's what they've all concluded. Fluctuating from 500 million people to more than 1 trillion. Scientists disagree not only on the final number, but more importantly about the best and most accurate way of determining that number.
1 billion? Are you nuts? No, wait, what?
Final number, but to more than 1 trillion.
1 trillion? Okay, relax, man. Relax yourself.
Scientists disagree not only on the final number, but more importantly about the best and most accurate way of determining that number, hence the huge variability. So Earth will probably be able to sustain 10 billion people, but we're not quite sure. What we are sure of though is that hitting peak population is not our biggest concern. It's instead what happens immediately after we hit it. And this is where the video takes a turn. You see, once we hit peak human population, it won't stay at 10 billion. Instead, it will decline, which you might believe is a good thing, but let me tell you, it's possibly the biggest challenge humankind has to overcome. While overpopulation puts a strain on natural resources, increases conflicts and wars, and causes water shortages and malnutrition, population shrinkage presents possibly way worse issues. And this population decline thing is not far into the future either. Oh no. It's already happening. In rich countries, for example, fertility rates have hovered below the replacement level of 2.1 for decades. And if you're wondering what the 2.1 means, it's the amount of children women need to have on average to sustain the population. So yeah, that's pretty worrying, and it's not just rich countries either, as middle-income countries across the world are also below the threshold, from Iran to Thailand and Brazil. More extreme examples include South Korea, where the fertility rate dipped to just 0.98 last year, and in the US it hit an all-time low of 1.73 births per woman. Now, according to the latest World Population Prospects from the UN, 27 countries have fewer people now than they did in 2010, and it expects 50.
Wait, really? Oh,
Five
shit.
nations, including China, to experience declines between now and 2050. So what are the consequences of this? Well, some of the economic consequences are pretty obvious. Fewer people make and consume less stuff. So a declining population means slower economic growth, or most likely an economic recession. The main concern with an economic recession is weak demand for investment, since companies expect a declining customer base, exactly the opposite of what you should expect as a company and investor, which will lead to deficient demand and thus high unemployment. In a new paper, provocatively titled The End of Economic Growth, Stanford University economics professor Charles Jones models what might happen in a world of declining population. Rather than per capita growth just chugging along, even as overall output declines, Mr. Jones argues that living standards would stagnate as the population gradually vanishes. He assumes that economic growth ultimately comes from new ideas, and the discovery of new ideas depends on the number of people researching them. So, if population began to decline at the global level, it would mean ever fewer people devoted to research and thus ever slower progress, at a time when new technologies already seem to become harder to find. But there is an even more alarming possibility, a vicious cycle in which low fertility in one generation causes low fertility in the next, leading to a never-ending downward spiral in population.
But isn't that sort of what you want? You want like less people to give birth whilst the population's going up. I mean, unless there's different sort of reasonings behind it, but if that's just it, I don't know why it's a bad thing if the population's slowing down. But I guess maybe because some countries are, but then some countries are still going crazy and it's like going up and up. But
this is the scenario that demographer Wolfgang Lutz and colleagues call the low fertility trap hypothesis. They propose a set of mechanisms whereby low fertility can pass itself from generation to generation. In particular, they suggest that willingness to marry and have children depends partly on whether a couple can meet with their material aspirations. But low fertility also goes hand in hand with aging populations and a rising tax burden to pay for pensions and healthcare. There's reason to suspect these.
I mean, I guess his reasoning was like the money and stuff, right? Companies will like start. People will stop being able to work for these companies and stuff and all these kind of things, but I feel like that's a thing that we could get through, but at the same time I don't know.
Mechanisms are already at work in suppressing fertility. In Japan, for example, almost all recent income growth for people of working age has been soaked up by tax rises and social insurance premiums to pay for the aging population. What is quite scary about Japan in particular is that Japan's population is projected to have already peaked in 2017 at 128 million people, and that this number will decline to just 53 million by 2100. So hopefully we will not end up in Japan's situation, but it seems population growth is not something we should be concerned about, but instead the population declining. That's it for this video. If you liked it, please.
Damn, I enjoyed this a lot, man. I feel like I learned quite a bit through this video. A major issue coming with population declines is that many societal constructs are based on the assumption of continuous growth, especially in economical regards, but also in general welfare systems. This is quite terrifying if you think about it, particularly on a global scale. I guess all sort of the things that are being planned and stuff, or things that are being built, are in the sort of assumption that the population is just gonna still keep going up and up. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed. God damn, that's deep, man. I think one of the more predominant problems yet to attack is waste management, and this will only get harder with a for now rising population. Great video, but it assumes the status quo of our current socio-economic system will always continue as business as usual. This is explained nicely by Slavoj Zizek. I've probably butchered that name. It is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. Might have to watch that as well. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this reaction. Bit different, but I'm definitely down to do more of this stuff if there's any other videos like this out there. But yeah, until next time, subscribe. Peace.